Hello, this is Dustin with ProAVSchool.com. I've been doing a lot of Crestron programming myself lately and really had to struggle to figure out how to get Smart Graphics button lists that are dynamic working in my projects. I didn't find much documentation on the help files or any of the stuff that Crestron had, so I thought I'd do a quick video and just kind of show you how to populate a dynamic button list. So first, what I've done here, this is just a simple test program, and I'll just drag it in right from the start here. So I want to go with dynamic button list vertical. The regular button list and the dynamic look the same. The dynamic gives you more properties, and they're kind of confusing. You have to play around with them to really understand what they are. That's why I want to kind of explain. So it's a smart object. I want to automatically assign the smart object ID. I can give it a name. I'll just call it my list. That's where it will show up in Simple Windows when you import it. And this is using the latest version of the Smart Graphics and everything. So earlier versions don't have the ability to refresh and to load your or manage your Smart Graphics properly within Simple Windows. But anyways, moving forward here. So there's some properties here that are somewhat interesting. Use enabled items. That lets you enable or disable different items through the program. Use visible items. Again, that lets you send feedback to it to show or not show. What I found the easiest is if you want to use a set number of items, and that's an analog join from the program that will give you that. You also want to use indirect text. That's what's going to feed your buttons. And a little trick, which I had to play around with some other modules to actually figure this out. Under the list items, if you're going to have a big long list, you can put these number of buttons up to 255. I'm not sure what the top end limit is, but you want to have more or at least as many as your biggest list size. So you can see there's a ton of them there. I'm just going to show you what the text would look like just with a label. Now these will be populated by your serial joins, so you don't have to worry too much about that. So anyway, Smart Object ID is set. I've got a name. You don't need a name, but I've done that. And then I'm just going to save. And you have to compile your project before you can import it in Simple Windows. I should also mention that this is saved as a Smart Xpanel Smart Graphics 2 so that I can show you without having a touch panel connected. So I did that. Now I'm going to go over to my Simple Windows program, and all I've done here, I've got a simple program with an Xpanel, and right click Manage Smart Graphics Extensions. I have to actually browse for it and pick the VTP file, open, and what that does is it brings my list. That's what I named it there on the other side, right there. So you double click that. Now this is kind of confusing. There's a lot of different sections. This is where the set visible items would show up, or set enabled. You can drive feedback to each of those. I don't find that really is all that useful. The process, obviously, you're going to want that. So I'm just going to quickly populate a bunch of these. Press F4. Then what you can actually do, if I hold down Shift, so I've got one selected, hold down Shift, go all the way to the bottom, press F4, and it auto-populates incrementally. It's a trick that'll save you a ton of time. The analog join, this is number of items. And I haven't really worried too much about item click and item held. Scroll to items actually gives you a nice animated way to go to a certain item number in a very long list. So you can play around with that. Item icons, if I had enabled dynamic icon setting, you can actually feed an analog join to that and determine what the icons are going to be from the icon set on runtime. You'd have to play around with that a bit. I've actually done that in the program and it works quite well. Now here's the interesting thing. Item text and item icons. The text fields is what you want to send to them. So I'm going to do that again. It's my little trick. Hold down Shift, go F4, and I probably didn't have to do 255 for this demo. Now I'm not going to actually feed it any logic. I'm going to just do it all on the fly just to make it simple. Save that. Compile the program. I'm also gonna, well, I already compiled that, so I don't need to do too much there. So it's just got to reboot my processor there. While it's doing that, on the output window of a compiled X panel, you can double click, it'll open up the folder. You can actually just start the panel file that way. It's a pretty slick way to do it. Now make sure my host settings are right. Now this is a dynamic list that has no items. So remember that set number of items. Right now it's 0, so you're not seeing anything. I'm just going to go into debugger here. And I'll just show you how some of this stuff behaves. This is probably the easiest way to demonstrate it. So number of items, right now it's 0. If I set it to 15, for example, you see right away it fills it in, and it's a scrollable list. Now each of those are selectable. You see the button presses and the feedback. So that's pretty cool. So you can set that on the fly. Usually you would populate that with like an address book from a video conference codec or something. So you set your number of items, and then you can dynamically feed the text to it from your program. So this is pretty cool. It's a lot easier than having a bunch of buttons and trying to work with all the joins, and also have the back and previous and next and everything. So obviously you would have your logic doing stuff like this, feeding your serials. And interesting to note, I can crunch this down to just 1. It doesn't get rid of what's in those, it just only shows 1. So if you open it up again, they're still there. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to say 255 just for an example. Now I didn't populate the scroll to item, but if I had fed scroll to 1 right now, it would automatically scroll it there. And then you can pick up the digital press. There's also an analog property if you hold it for a while. I don't think I joined that one. If you hold it for I think 5 seconds, it will pulse what analog index went, and you can use that for different things. But this is just a simple way to show you how to use a dynamic button list. Hope you enjoyed it. For more tips, tricks, and techniques, go to proavschool.com and be sure to sign up for our newsletter. Thank you.